Hello, and welcome to our webinar. Today, our webinar is called I-9 Compliance, Adapting to Trump's Increased Immigration Enforcement. We're excited to have all of you join us today. My name is Michelle Lanter-Smith. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at EPAY Systems, and I'm with Anna Pajor. She is our SPHR HR Consultant Certified Consultant here at EPAY. Welcome, Anna.
Thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much.
It's great to have you. Anna's background has been extensive in HR. She's been in the field for over 10 years, and she has worked both in HR departments and in consulting firms, helping others get their HR in order and making sure that they're compliant. She specializes in employers that employ blue-collar hourly workers and is very familiar with the topic we're going to cover today, I-9. Let's go through very quickly, though, the agenda, so you have an idea of what Anna's going to be talking about. First, I'm just going to spend 30 seconds and tell you a little bit about EPAY Systems, but then Anna's going to go into why I-9s are more important today than ever before, and then really about how you should correctly complete an I-9 and pitfalls and things you should watch out for, specifically when you're doing I-9 work for the distributed workforce, and then what to do in case you do have an I-9 audit or an ICE site visit. Now, before we get started, I do want to do a little bit of housekeeping. I think that's in order. You're going to get a copy of today's slides, so don't worry about that, because let me tell you, there's a lot of really good information. This will also be recorded, so you can have others listen to it if you'd like. You will get a certificate for your SHRM credit. You'll need to stay on the session for the full hour. At the end of the session, there'll be a short survey. That way we know you were here with us for the whole hour. It's very quick. We just want to know how we did. So a few quick questions there. You're also going to receive from us an I-9 mistakes checklist that we think you'll find very, very helpful. So that's it for the housekeeping. If you have a question, please go ahead and enter it into the question box that's in the right-hand side of your screen. Now, let me just tell you briefly about EPAY. We have been in the human capital management business since 2001. We're based in Chicago, and we specialize in SaaS-based solutions that help that real hard-to-manage, hard-to-track hourly workforce. We started out in time and attendance, have a very robust workforce management solution today, and we now have a full platform from pre-hire to retire. But again, where we do really well, and Anna will talk about this a little bit more, is those employers that have that workforce that's on the go, moving from site to site. Those are tough ones because there's shift differentials, pay rules, unions, things like that. Not a lot of HR companies can handle that. We can. It's the kind of customer that we love to serve. We have over, close to 500,000 users on the system. We are at 75,000 work sites around the world. And what our customers love about it is that 24/7 support that we provide every day of the year. Now, what HR company, whether it's payroll or time and attendance, are you able to get 24/7 support? Because of that, we have a really great customer retention rate that we're. And I just want to remind you, again, Anna has obviously been trained and is well-skilled in this area, but she doesn't know your specific situation. So in many cases, she's speaking generically. So the contents of this presentation should not be construed as legal advice. You should always consult your own lawyer or HR professional that can answer your questions specific to your business. All right. Well, Anna, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Okay. Thank you, Michelle. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm happy to welcome everybody here. Thank you so much for joining. I'm sure I'm not the only one that has noticed all the news articles and the alerts after another ICE raid or audit. There has been a dramatic shift in immigration policy under President Trump's administration, and the USCIS, along with the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement, have been taking action. So far in 2018, the impact of these new policies and enforcements can be seen in the statistics. We've already had an increase of 50% in worksite enforcement actions and a 400% increase in administrative arrests compared to 2017. Worksite investigations have almost doubled in I-9 audits and have gone up by over 1,000 compared to the entire year of 2017. To be one of the most complicated forms to fill out. There's over 900 pages associated with guidelines, handbooks, website publications, and government alone. And honestly, guys, I have seen HR professionals with 20 years of experience plus still make mistakes on these forms. So there's a lot of mistakes that can come back in huge fines. So it's very important to follow the instructions. Always check if you are ever unsure about something. Just don't risk it.
Now, Anna, if an employee has accepted a job, but they aren't going to start right away, can you get started on that I-9?
It's a great question, and the answer is absolutely yes. You can get started on that I-9 the second that employee has accepted that position with you. As much as we may want to take a good, hurdle and get that started earlier to avoid the time crunch, the stipulation is very important that we cannot ask for verification documents before the employee has accepted that job with you. And to remove any confusion, all U.S. employers must fill out an I-9 for every employee they hire to verify employment eligibility. There are, of course, a few exceptions, but very few. Anyone that's hired on or before November 6th of 1986 who are still employed and expect to remain employed. People that you employ very casually, and when I mean casually, I mean, the kid mowing your lawn every other weekend in the summer. Independent contractors or other contract workers, such as workers from a temp agency or staffing agency, and anyone not physically working on U.S. soil. So again, it's going to be a very rare occasion that you're not completing that form. Section 1 must be completed and signed by the new employee by the end of their first day, and any later is considered a violation. That's going to come up here a lot, friends. Now, you don't need to fill out the I-9 on a physical hard copy. It could be through an onboarding system like EPAY or using an online template provided by the government. If you decide to use the electronic template, it needs to be printed out afterwards and signed by the employee. If it's not printed and signed manually, it's considered incomplete. Whether the employee is filling out a hard copy or an electronic version, you must provide instructions. And it's really to your benefit to do so because you're liable for every error on this form.
Okay, Anna, we've had our first question come in just now. They've asked, can I highlight sections on forms to help employees know what to fill out on the form?
Yes, actually that's a very good question. And yes, you can actually include small notes or highlight items to help that employee complete that form, as long as the form can still be clear and read. So make sure it's legible. Once they're actually finished with Section 1, review the form and make sure, if you're using a hard copy, everything is legible. The employee signed and dated the form, that a box is in the Preparer Translator section has been selected, and that the employee filled out all the fields. Note that your employees are not required to provide a Social Security number unless you're using E-Verify. You can require an employee to provide you, or should I say you cannot require an employee to provide you with a document with their Social Security number on it. And doing so can actually constitute an unlawful discrimination case. Employees' emails and phone numbers are also not required on the form, but again, if you're using E-Verify for any employee who lists their email address, that address should be entered into the E-Verify database to stay compliant and allow that employee to view any updates on their E-Verification. For any field that does not apply, you want to make sure that NA is entered into that field. EPAY's onboarding system will not let an employee move on until the boxes are all filled, but for everyone else, always check to make sure all lines are completed. Pass it back to the employee if anything is missing because you're not allowed to complete any portion of this section. When reviewing the work authorization, make sure only the box is selected. If an expiration date is listed, make sure to take note that this might mean re-verification and will be required to do at a later date. And finally, make sure that every field is filled out. Only one box can be selected, but other blank fields will need to be filled out with an NA. This is one of the most common mistakes by employees and employers. Even when using instructions, people will often just skip right through to the section that applies to them and realize that all lines need to be filled out. Employees can certainly have help completing Section 1, including using a translator, but employees must sign the form even if a preparer or translator helps them. The preparer or translator who helps must provide their name, address, and sign and date the form. The date should match the employee's signature. This section can be important for minors and for disabled employees who cannot physically complete the form. In the case of minors, a parent or legal guardian can fill out Section 1 for the minor, and in Section 2, in place of document B, mark minor under age 18. A list from the C documents is still required. For disabled employees who need help filling out the I-9, representative of a nonprofit organization, association, or rehabilitation program, parent or legal guardian can certainly assist them, but must still fill out the translator preparation certificate section. Whether they use a preparer or not, a box must be checked in this section, so make sure that employee did not overlook it. If the employee is using the Spanish version of the I-9, they do not need to fill out the translator box, but the Spanish version is really only meant to be a translation tool and cannot be completed and retained. You must retain the English form. Unlike the last form, in the first box is checked, do not use, the rest of the field can be left blank. Trust me, I tried in the government template and it would not allow me to type anything.
All right, we actually have two relevant questions here. Can minors act as translators or preparers? And what happens when you have more than one person helping as a translator or a preparer?
Those are very, very good questions. Minors can certainly act as translators or preparers and often do for their parents. And they can certainly fill out that section. As for multiple preparers, on an electronic form, there should be an option to add another preparer. I know that's how EPAY's onboarding works. And for hard copies, simply get another section from the I-9 and fill out that section and staple it to the original.
Sounds good.
And now, of course, it's your turn. And just for you, it gets even more complicated. Section 2 must be completed by the employer to record the documentation presented and signed the form within 3 business days of the employee's first day. So if you don't have it dated within 3 days, even if it's because the employee never brought in their documents, you're still held accountable for that violation. So let's run through the steps you need to complete the form. Ensure any document that the employee presents is a list of acceptable documents or the acceptable receipt. So my recommendation would actually be to talk to your new hires before their first day and have them bring in the documents on their first day. There's no need to risk the 3-day rule. Just get it done the first day. Physically examine each document to determine if it reasonably appears to be genuine and if it relates to that employee presenting it. If, for whatever reason, you reject a document, you must allow that employee to present another document from the list of acceptable documents. We're not going to cover the entire list of acceptable documents here, but if you're ever unsure of what documents can be submitted, just check the USCIS for the full list of acceptable documents. Whatever documents that the employee submits, there are some ground rules, of course, that you have to follow. For starters, you cannot actually specifically require them to bring in specific documents. Instead, though, you can give them examples of what other people have brought in. Whatever documents you receive, you have to examine in person. So make sure you're physically checking those documents. Enter in the employee's information in Section 1. Record the document title, the issuing authority, the numbers, and the expiration date, if there's any, from the original document the employee presented. Enter the data and the date the employee will begin work. Provide the name, the signature and the title of the person completing Section 2, as well as the date completed. Record the business name and the address of the employer. If your company has multiple locations, use the most appropriate address with respect to that employee. In other words, where is that I-9 being completed? Return the documentation back to the employee.
Oh, Anna, we have a good question here. Can you accept expired documents like an expired passport?
Oh, that is actually a really good question. Currently, no, you can't. In the past, you could have. So to be clear, at this point, expired documents are not acceptable. That's actually a very common mistake, and another mistake related to various lots of dates. One for the date the employee begins work, and then the date the employer examines the verification. So because photocopies cannot be accepted of any documents, and this also goes for viewing documents via webcam, I know that question has come up several times in my career, employers who work with a distributed or remote workforce need to find another person to review the documents in person. For this, you'll select an authorized representative. What this actually means is someone you actually authorize to review the material for you. But ultimately, you really want to be careful who you select because you can be held liable for any mistakes that they make. So most often, this will be a site manager, but you could also use an HR connection that you know that's in the area. When you attend those conferences, make some friends. Good way to do it. Whoever you choose, make sure to communicate with them before and walk them through the steps with them. Even notaries, I know that seems like the most logical selection because they're often filling out government forms, will need a lot of guidance. Most commonly, they'll actually want to notarize the form, and notarizing this form is a giant no-no, so please don't let them do that. Now, this section does need to be complete for new hires, so just leave this part blank. One of the reasons to complete Section 3 is when the employee documents that you verified in Section 2 expire. But you should not re-verify for U.S. citizens or national citizens, non-national citizens, lawful permanent residents, and any List B documents, because List B documents are used to verify identity. Only documents concerned with employment verification need to be re-verified. Again, keep track of any expiration dates and re-verify as early as possible to avoid non-compliance. You must request employee documents to re-verify before the actual expiration date. To re-verify, employees must present the unexpired documents from either List A or C showing the authorization to work. Again, just as at the beginning, you can't specify which documents you want them to show you. And the re-verification documents do not need to be the same as the prior expired documents. Whatever section you fill out, all other sections need to be filled out with an NA to be complete and compliant.
Can you accept a receipt for a lost document?
Well, that's a very good question. So yes, you can certainly accept a receipt for a lost document, but you want to take note that that receipt is going to have a very short expiration date. So you want to take note of that expiration date so that employee can make sure to bring you the correct document when they actually have it in their possession. Make sense?
Yes, that makes sense.
Perfect. Similar to when you fill out the form, you may only correct errors in Section 2 or Section 3. For any issues that you discover in Section 1, you need to ask the employee to correct the error, of course. To correct multiple errors, you can redo the section on the actual I-9 form and a new I-9 form and attach it to the old form. A new form can also be completed if major errors need to be corrected. A note should always be included in the file regarding the reason you made any changes to the existing I-9 or completed a new form. The best way to correct the form is to strike through the incorrect information and enter the correct information, and then initial and date that correction. Please, please, please do not use whiteout to cover up any changes. Whiteout will basically remove any record of the changes made, and doing so will lead to an increased liability. If you have previously made any changes in whiteout, USCIS will recommend that you attach a note to the corrected forms and explain what actually happened. Be sure to sign and date that note. Whatever mistake or changes you make on the I-9, you should always sign and date and explain in some fashion to keep an audit trail intact. To stay in compliance, we must retain an employee's completed form for as long as the individual works for you and even after employment has ended. So in the case, you must keep an I-9 until later of 3 years or after the date of hire, 1 year after the date of employment is terminated. So here's an example. You want to start with the employee's first day of work and then add 3 years to that date. Next, we take the date of termination and add 1 year to that date. For those two calculations, always take the date that is later. In this case, 3 years from the employee's first day was later than 1 year since termination. Since I-9s contain personal information about employees, they should always be stored using some measure of safeguarding, meaning a locked cabinet of some sort. No matter how you choose to store your I-9s, you must be able to present them within 3 days of being requested. So if you are storing original paper forms, you must separate them from the employee personnel files. What I would actually recommend is having a binder for active employees and then terminated employees. And if you're storing I-9s electronically, this is also comes with certain safeguards to consider. Any storage system must prevent unauthorized access. Ensure an audit trail so that any alteration or change is tracked and can be accessed by anyone inspecting the forms. Include a quality assurance program, and detailed index of the individual records can be accessed easily. And produce a high degree of reliability and display on screen and reproducing on paper. So what do we do when ICE comes knocking? Whether on a raid or just to notify you of an upcoming audit, you have certain rights that you can use to help protect your company for further liability. As always, the best defense is prevention. Have a designated officer appointed to coordinate between agents and your company's own legal team, and train your front-facing personnel. Whoever is covering the reception area will have them know who to contact and what to do in case of a site visit. Company-wide, you should issue a set of standards and procedures that employees know their rights. Work with your immigration counsel to set up the best standards for your company. When faced with ICE agents, contact your immigration legal counsel. Read any warrant presented. Is this a warrant signed by a judge, or is it from the Department of Homeland Security? What are the locations to be searched? And what items are actually on the subpoena? No, you do not have to answer any questions. You can request legal counsel if you're required to act as a representative for the company. Any questions for names, documents, or identifications that are not required, an employee can decline.
So Anna, tell us a little different.
Get to that in a little bit, so the main difference between a raid and an audit is knowing what to expect and to either, I need a sip of my tea. I apologize.
It's a lot of talking, isn't it, going on and on.
Mm-hmm. Sorry, everybody. So the main difference between a worksite raid and an audit is knowing what to expect in either situation and really reduce your risk and, of course, your stress level. In the case of an ICE raid, you will not have any notice or warning, and agents will most likely enter into the judicial search warrant, meaning it has been signed and a judge and followed process of due process has been followed. With this kind of warrant, officers can arrest unauthorized workers, enter private areas of business, and seize relevant documents. only if they are listed on the search warrant. So officers are allowed to request original documents rather than copies, but it's your right to make copies of whatever documents they're taking. So as they are leaving, officers should always leave you with an inventory of the property and employees arrested. In the case that agents enter your business not for a full-scale raid, but only seeking out specific employees for removal or deportation, then they are most likely entering with an administrative warrant. You will most likely have no idea that one is coming until they actually show up at your doorstep.
Oh, nice.
Uh-huh. At that time, you would receive a notification of inspection, which often is in the form of a subpoena for your I-9 records and other documents required to verify your compliance. If violations are discovered during the inspection, the employee is either given a warning or notice of intent to file. At this point, the employer has a chance to either negotiate a settlement with ICE, or they can request a hearing for the officer of the Chief Administrative Hearing Office, and that's done within 30 days. So again, averaging $2,236 per violation. The cost for your I-9 violations and other civil fines are very high, amounting in a total of $105.4 million last year alone, with statistics pitting 2018 enforcement actions at 50% higher. This total is expected to be much higher this year. Hiring employees without complying with the employment eligibility verification requirements is a violation of the law. If you fail to properly complete or retain I-9s, you could be subject to civil money penalties. In determining the amount of penalties, the following factors may be considered. So the size of your business, whether or not you're doing this in good faith or you're intentionally doing it, the seriousness of the violation, and whether or not the individual was an authorized alien, and the history of your previous violations as an employer. So you want to note here that the criminal penalties may apply in the event that the employer engages in a pattern or practice of knowingly hiring or continuing to employ unauthorized aliens, for engaging in fraud or otherwise misusing identified identity documents.
I think we have some more questions. So now all the questions that we didn't get to today on the webinar, we will release the list of all the questions asked and we will answer them for you. So let's start with Social Security numbers. Can you go through and explain Social Security numbers in Section 1 again?
Sure. So the Social Security number in Section 1 is actually not required unless you're doing E-Verify. So if the employee decides not to put in their Social Security number, they can put in NA. Again, it's not a required field unless you're using E-Verify.
Okay. So the next question is, do we need to re-verify all employees on a yearly basis?
No, you would only need to re-verify those employees that have expired documents. So for example, if they have a work authorization that expires in, say, 2 years, and you take note of that expiration date. So you want to actually notify them probably 30 days before to let them know, hey, your re-verification, you're going to need to recertify. So you don't want to recertify all employees, only those that have a work authorization date that expires.
Now, if you highlight sections in the form for your employees, this person writes in, are you technically required to identify as a preparer?
No, because you're simply highlighting the section.
Okay.
If you're actually, as the employer, you should not be the preparer or translator.
Okay. Back to Section 1. Can Section 1 be typed out instead of manually written?
Section 1, again, has to be complete by the employee, not by the employer. So you as the employer cannot type it out for them. However, if you're using an electronic form issued by the government, that's a PDF, and they can physically type it out, then yes, they can certainly do that. But you as the employer cannot type it out for them.
Of course, if you're in a good onboarding system, it's all typed.
Absolutely. It's all electronically onboarded, and very, in our system, there's no room for error.
All right. Anna, can you cover the rehiring process? So within 3 years of your first hire, an I-9 form, then can you use that same form?
Within 3 years, yes, you can use the recertification form. However, my personal recommendation is to just start fresh with a new form. It just keeps it cleaner. You don't have to look at the dates. And so the government allows you to do either. I would just personally make the recommendation to start with a fresh form.
All right, we got lots of questions, so I'm going to keep asking, and keep them coming in. So we left a lot of time for Q&A, so use this time. All right, if an employee brings in a passport to fulfill List A, does NA need to be need to be written in all the boxes? Sorry, that's a little type.
That's okay, I completely understand. That's a very good question, and again, one of the most common mistakes made. So yes, if the employee brings in a passport from List A, you want to complete that section, and then yes, you would actually put in NA for not applicable in Section B and Section C. And I would actually recommend to do it anywhere there's a blank line. Complete is compliance.
Okay. Next question. Are we responsible for checking our employee files for expiration dates on I-9?
Yes.
Yes. You got to do it.
Yes,
okay.
The employer is responsible for this.
All right. Next question. So do we need to re-verify all employees on a yearly basis? Oh, we already answered that question.
Yep.
Okay, the answer is no. Yeah, listen. All right. When an employee has a name change and needs to be re-verified, what is the time frame for filling out the I-9?
That is a great question. Ultimately, you want to do it as soon as the employee lets you know. So they let you know they're going to do it right away, basically. The sooner the better. But again, I would stick to 3 days, but.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, as soon as they have the document, basically.
We're looking for our next question. Keep them coming in. I think we've gotten most of them. Does anybody have any others or any slides that you'd like us to go over? Because we moved through some of them quickly. If you do, just type it in and we'll see it come through. All right, we got one question. You ready, Anna?
Mm-hmm.
If an employee does not bring their documents in within 3 days, should they be termed, or can you just have them go inactive until they bring in their documents?
So I actually wouldn't recommend terminating them. Yes, you can certainly make them inactive until basically, I would issue a suspension until they come back with those documents. If you find that they're not going to come in with those documents, which can sometimes happen, then technically you would just simply say that the employee has not provided those documents and has not cleared the verification process.
Okay. For this one, I think we might have to go back into the slides. Could you please elaborate on the rehiring of employees I-9 process? So we're going to go back into the slides. We can bring it up for Anna.
Okay.
So it's the rehiring. Section 3.
Okay. So just to go over Section 3 once more?
Yes.
Sure. Okay, so this is a re-verification of rehires. If you are basically rehiring somebody, there is a time frame where you can do this. Again, my recommendation, instead of searching for it and determining whether or not they're eligible, I would actually complete a new I-9. That would always be my recommendation. However, if it's within the 3 years and you just want to do a quick recertification, you certainly can by completing it. So again, let's see, there's the last name. This is all something that you're completing as the employer. If they bring in new documents, you would actually list them in the C section and then sign off on the form. And again, anything that's not applicable, you would cover with the NA.
NA. Two very important letters in this process.
Absolutely. It is the one that gets everybody in trouble. So please, if there's anything else that you take from this, if you're keeping hard copies, make sure to put NA, because those fines are going to tack up quickly.
Okay, thanks, Anna. Here we go. Another question. Oh, they're coming in. Great, guys. If you fill out the I-9 in good faith and get minor things incorrect, but you've done it in good faith, like you're not dating it or putting the ID in the wrong list column, will the government give you a warning or will they just penalize you?
More than likely, they'll actually issue a warning if it's all done in good faith. But ultimately, it depends on the number of violations. So again, you just want to keep this on track. Knowing is preventing.
Okay. All right, I have a question for you. Can you film the officers when they are on a site visit or, with a raid or they're doing an audit? Can you put them on film?
That is a very, very good question. So the answer more than likely is going to be yes, but it's going to depend on the state that you're in. Certain states have different requirements, so you'd want to check what applies to you. But even if the officers say you can't record them, no matter what your state ruling actually is, you can always take notes of their actions, where they went, who they talked to. You want to list whoever the officers were. Take as many detailed notes as you need. This is your right, and they can't take your notes away from you, and they can't make you stop taking notes either. So that's a very good question.
Okay, next question. I have 100 plus employees that have been employed for at least 5 years. Should I have them fill out new I-9s or recertify?
Very good question. So you would actually want to do an audit. So you would want to go through what you currently have. If you're finding that you're missing all the documents or a majority of the documents, then yes, you would actually want to reissue all. You wouldn't want to do recertifications. What you would also want to do is if you have all of your I-9s, but there's minor errors, is again, strike through the errors. If you need to take it back to the employee to have them put in any NAs, which is more than likely, that's where I would start. I wouldn't start with issuing all new I-9s or recertifying.
Okay. Next question. Can the employer add the NA in the employee section if the employee leaves it blank? Or do you need to have the employee put NA?
So that would be not considered a best practice. Section 1 is strictly for the employee. So if the employee did not write it in, you'd actually want to return it to the employee and have them complete it. Even if you're auditing and you discover this, 3 years later, you still would want to do that.
So if you have an electronic system and the employee doesn't fill it out, it automatically puts the NA and you don't have that exposure.
So I can't speak to all electronic systems, but I know EPAYs definitely will not let the employee go any further. They must complete those.
That's a good safeguard.
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. How many years can an I-9 be kept on file for current employees and employees who have been termed?
That is a great question. You can, so let me make sure I understand it. Is it for active employees or termed?
Let's see. How many years can an I-9 be kept on file for current employees? So that'd be active and termed. So
yeah.
Both ways.
Yeah. So for active employees, you would keep them on forever.
As long as they're active.
As long as they're active. So again, if you're having hard copies of these I-9s, I recommend the 2-binder system. And if you're way, way over, hundreds of employees, then definitely move to an electronic system because it's a lot easier that way. But once they're termed, we would follow the formula that I presented earlier, and that's basically 1 year after the termination date or 3 years after the date of hire, depending of which is later. So I hope that answers that question.
All right, give me 1 second while we scroll through some more questions here.
Thank you guys for being so lively and active and participating.
Yeah. All right. Can an employer be penalized if an employee dates the form for Section 1 in the wrong date format? Example, not using, MMDDYYY. Lots of employees use just month, day, year, not the 2-digit.
Yep. I know exactly where that's coming from, and yes, the answer is they certainly can penalize you for that. Again, that's why you want to review that form after that employee hands it to you. Make sure it is in the correct format. That's one of the common mistakes.
So that's why you want a good onboarding system. At EPAY, we do have that, so that it is put into the right format.
Absolutely.
Don't worry about this.
Mistake-free.
Okay. Question coming in from Shelley. Just want to confirm that in the section where it asks if they are a citizen, if they mark yes in the other areas, do I need to put an NA on 2, 3, and 4?
Yes, you do.
Okay. All right, question coming in from Chelsea. Or no, not Chelsea, Chelaine. If you complete an I-9 audit and discover a document expiration date is missing in Section 2, how do you correct this if it is several years later?
That is a very, very good question. Again, you would actually go back to see one thing this actually brings me to address is whether or not you're keeping photocopies of these documents that are used. As a general rule of thumb, you do not have to keep these documents that are used, but if you are keeping them, then you want to keep them for all. So if you've kept copies, then you can reference those copies. If you have not, then you would, again, really create a note to the audit, and you would actually request it from that employee. And you can let them know what the situation is and let them know what documents they'd like to present.
And if you keep the copies, they better be locked up.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
They better be locked up. All right. Next question. Do you keep the copies in the same file with the I-9?
Yes, I would actually staple them and attach them to the I-9 if you're keeping the copies.
All right. Another question from Shelley. Do I need to go back and recertify all my employees as that has not been done? Maybe we can find Shelley's previous question.
So no, if you need to recertify anything, it's again because that work authorization has expired or possibly a rehire.
So like a visa has expired?
Correct.
Okay. Okay. If no preparer or translator is used to complete Section 1, do you have to put in an NA in those boxes requesting translator information? If so, if you do, who puts in the NA in those boxes, the employee or the employer?
That is another great question. This section is actually completed by the employee, so they need to select whether or not they've used a preparer or translator. If they select that they have not, there is no NA required, and that is the only section that does not require that NA.
Wow, okay. Who would have known? All these rules.
A lot of rules.
All right, we're looking for the next question coming in. Back to rates. If you're rated, does the government look at terminated employee files or just current employees? I see that first question, and she has more.
Sure. So again, they can ask for both. They can ask for active as well as terminated files. again, that's why it's important to pay attention to that formula. You want to really discard those that are terminated and no longer there within that formula, because then we only want to give them what they're asking for.
Okay. Now, if the government audits you, is it active and terminated employee files, both, versus erase?
Typically, it's for both.
Okay. What was said is, what Samantha says is, because if we do a self-audit, we can't correct any errors we find for terminated employees.
Correct, but then you could put a note that this was discovered in and just attach it to that file. So they're aware that you've already seen it.
Okay. Are we to determine if a document is fake or not? Ryan asked.
That is a fantastic question. All you can do, you're not considered an expert in government forms. If in doubt, you can reference USCIS's government forms. They'll have pictures on there to review. But if you genuinely believe this is an authentic document, then that's all that you're attesting to.
Okay. Janice is asking, is there a good website to reference if you have questions when filling out I-9?
Yes, there's a very good website to reference, and we will actually include that in the attachment that we sent out.
I believe we'll send out a follow-up email.
Correct.
We'll make sure it's in there for you, Janice.
I don't want to give you the wrong one. I think it's uscis.gov, but that's me going off of my memory.
All right. Can page 1 and 2 be on the same piece of paper, or does it need to be on 2 different pieces of paper?
So you would actually want to use the government form. So section 1 is always the first page. Well, I think it's page 8 or 9, if I remember, because there's a whole slew of instructions first. And then section 2 is covered on the page following that.
All right. What do you do when the employee's name on the I-9 and the document doesn't match?
So the question is, really, if the names do not match, is it a typo? For example, is the Social Security number or card have a typo? For example, they don't have the middle initial. If you legitimately believe that it is reasonable to suspect that this is that employee's and it reasonably pertains to them, then you can accept it. However, if it's definitely something that, it says Elizabeth instead of Amanda, then you can definitely question and request a different form. But again, reference the list of acceptable documents.
Okay. Is the I-9 form and the instructions available in Spanish?
That's a very good question. I believe the answer, actually, yes. Yes. In fact, I had to think about that. It's been a minute. But yes, they're all available in Spanish as well.
And on the EPAY system, it's available in English and Spanish too.
Yes. And again, I have to say, you cannot retain the Spanish form. So if you're using it, it's a translation tool.
Okay. What happens if you realize that an employee completed an I-9 and so did the employer? It was not run through E-Verify until a month after the employee started. It was discovered through an audit.
So basically, they've completed the I-9, but they've not completed the E-Verify.
Right, until a month after.
Until a month after. So E-Verify is a little bit different. It's usually not required, but there are some states that now make that mandatory. So it depends on that specific state. Again, if you're discovering this through an audit, my recommendation would be to put that in the note of the file.
I guess it sounds like it's better to, when you have a mistake, to fess up to your mistake.
Exactly.
And document it.
Exactly.
There'll be maybe more forgiveness down the road?
Absolutely. If it's all done in good faith, then there's a lot more forgiveness. If you're actively trying to, lie to the government, they don't take that very well.
Okay. All right. I think we might have all the questions answered. Boy, there were a lot of questions, more than I've ever seen before.
I'm glad I ran right through this then. There's plenty of room for it.
There's plenty of room, yeah. We're doing one quick check here to make sure that we've gotten everybody's questions. And if not, we will definitely put it out in our email so that you can get the answer to that. I just want to go ahead then and wrap up and talk a little bit about our system and what EPAY can do. Again, we're almost to the top of the hour, so we certainly won't run over. We know you've got to get back to work. But EPAY is a full human capital management provider, and in that we offer a system that starts with applicant tracking, then moves on to onboarding, then of course time and attendance, payroll, and benefit administration and tracking, and then finally also performance management. So we can do the whole kit and caboodle. And Anna here is an HR consultant. She also works very closely with our clients. Some of our clients like to have her HR services. So in addition to having the software platform and our payroll processing and so on, they use services that Anna provides and other colleagues provide that help them through HR type questions. So again, a full human capital management provider, and we really welcome the opportunity to work with you. So if you are in an HR department and maybe you're not getting the great customer service that you all deserve, or you don't have a full pre-hire to retire type of platform, an all-encompassing end-to-end solution, it's time that you take a look. And we would like to serve you in that. So it looks like we've gotten to most of the questions. Anna, anything that you would like to add?
If in doubt, NA. But make sure to audit those files frequently. You really, really, really don't want those penalties.
Okay. Well, at EPAY, we'd like to be your partner, very much so, and we'd like to do a specific demonstration for your company so we can show you our full solution and suite. And perhaps by partnering with us, you can get some wonderful services and have resources like Anna to answer those questions for you. At the end, like I promised, there'll be a short survey. If you could complete the short survey, let us know how we did and how we can do better. We'd like to offer you a quick tour. So maybe you're not ready for a demonstration, but if you'd like to see a quick tour of our solution, we'd like to show that to you. Or, of course, you can request a demonstration. Definitely connect with us on LinkedIn. Go into LinkedIn, type in EPAY Systems. You will see Anna out there consistently forwarding and talking about different blogs and interesting information on HR topics. So we put those out regularly. Well, thank you, everybody, for joining us today. You will be able to claim your SHRM credit, and we appreciate your time. At EPAY, we'd like to be your partner for your full human capital management solution. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you, Anna. You did a wonderful job.
Thank you, everybody.
Have a great day. Goodbye.